Welcome to the MadHouse Podcast, a safe place where we discuss the things that have been on our mind. So sit back, relax, as we dive deep down into the rabbit hole to see how far it goes. Welcome to the MadHouse Podcast. Today we're talking about a subject that's kind of been heavy on my heart for a while. I'm sure it's been heavy on yours. A lot's going on with the social climate today. And I think that I'll go ahead and let you lead the discussion because I know you got a lot on your mind about this right now. So
I do have a lot on my mind.
So what were you thinking? Introduce us to what we're talking about today.
I'm gonna preface all this just by saying, I don't even know how I want to say this. Hopefully, you ain't got too much going on today because this is gonna be a little bit of a longer episode. So I just want to make that disclaimer now because I can kind of get into the weeds a little bit, so I'll try my best to kind of stay on topic. But this is just something that's really been on my mind, and
Yeah.
I mean, social injustice is just like it's something that has always been there, but it just seems as though we've come to a point in society that I just feel like it's at that boiling point right now. Like, it is literally so mentally taxing to have to deal with this and see it on such a broad scale every few weeks. And like, granted, it's not like it's something that's brand new. It's something that's been going on, since I've been alive. But like, I just feel like now we're getting to the point where it's just becoming too much to deal with, and it's becoming so prevalent, and like, it's just always in your face. It's like always right there. It's like event after event, day after day, week after week. It's like one thing will happen, and then the next week something else will happen,
Yeah.
and then something else will happen, and it's like they just keep compounding and getting higher and higher, and like it really just takes so much out of you, and it's to the point now where I don't want to say that I'm starting to feel it more than ever, but like I'm starting to take it a lot more personally now, and I'm starting to get more heavily affected for the simple fact is I have a child now. So like when I see these things happen, I not only equate it to myself, but I think about it from my child's standpoint. Like, I think about Philando Castillo, and he was in the car with his girlfriend, and he had his child in the back, and he says, "Hey, I have a gun. I have a license to carry this." And even with that information, knowing that he was legally able to have that gun, you still gunned this man down in front of his girlfriend and in front of his child. Like, there was a child in the car, and you shot him in front of, of his family. And, like,
Yeah.
it saddens me so much that, like, to think, and I don't ever want to put myself in anybody's situation, and, like, but that's kind of where I go. Like, I just imagine being in that situation, thinking I'm doing the right thing, because I have a gun. So, and there are times where sometimes I'll put my gun in the car. Like when me and Jake go somewhere. Like sometimes I might put it in the car. Like, what would be my thought process if me getting pulled over, being afraid for my life because I don't know how the situation is gonna play out. I'm afraid, and I'm looking at my son in the back, and he's looking at me, and he's a child. He doesn't know any better. He doesn't even know what's going on.
Yeah.
But he doesn't even know that this could very well be the last time that he's ever going to see his father. Like, this could be it. And as I'm looking back at him as, like, everything is going on, I'm looking at my son thinking to myself, man, this could be the last time I ever see my son. And that it saddens me because no matter what you do, no matter how hard you try, you could do everything that they ask, and you could still be killed. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because maybe they have a personal bias. And let me say this. I want to go ahead and put this out there. I am not saying that every police officer is a bad person.
No.
I'm not saying that by any means. Like, I'm not trying to, stereotype every single police officer is like they're racist. They're out to kill black people. I am not saying that. But what I am saying that there are police that abuse their power and that are racist, and I think it shows, and it's starting to come out more and more now, and it's extremely frustrating because there are good cops out there. Like, I know some good cops, But I also know that there are bad cops out there, and I've had bad experiences with police officers myself, and I can attest to that. So it's so mentally taxing to have to see this all the time, and it's even more frustrating when you hear other people talk about it, and I just assume that we all feel the same way about it because we all saw the same thing, and
you yeah, other people, you'll see like people come to defense or like,
yeah,
it wasn't that bad, and it's like it's funny because I think people have a real like jaded view on things when they don't affect them.
yeah,
And I remember, and I know that feeling of going into a situation where you don't know if you might come back. So yeah, I kind of get it, but there's also, I guess, kind of, you would call them like rules of engagement. I remember on deployment. I remember before we were going into Africa, and I remember before we even went into Africa, they were like, "Hey, you can't shoot at someone unless they're actually shooting at you first." So, and they said this. They said there's kids who like to point AKs at people who are running like patrols or whatever. They said there may be kids who come up to you and flash AKs at you like they want to shoot you, but you can't engage them unless someone actually takes fire. And I remember thinking about that. I was like, man, that's crazy. So you telling me that I'm knowingly going in a situation where someone could possibly point a gun at me, and I can't react unless they actually fire. You know how fast the bullet travels? Like
faster than you can comprehend.
Yeah,
it just happened.
So, but it's weird. So I know the stressors, but at the same time, we had those rules of engagement.
Yeah.
And if we were to say, "Oh man, I saw somebody flash a gun and I shot," well, we already told you beforehand, it can get dicey out there. But you know what? That's the risk of the job. And I feel like, as a cop, I know it can be tough. And like you said, there's good cops out there. But there's a difference between actually fearing for your life and being in actual danger. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Because I feel like sometimes some people take those biases and those prejudices and they assume the worst.
Yeah.
And they escalate the situation in their head
based off that prejudice, yeah.
Before it's actually even escalated to that point. And I feel like you can really de-escalate situations without a lot of violence. Now, not all the time. We don't live in a perfect world, but I feel like you don't always have to escalate certain situations. For example, when I can think of many times, but I remember always, every time, I got to a point when I was in high school, I was like, man, I can't go out with black folks. And you're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I can, but if I get into a car with my friends and we go out at night, guaranteed to get pulled over every time. It happened every time. We come back from the club and we're heading back home, 12 o'clock. We're just headed home. Leaving the club or wherever, we're just headed to the house. Pulled over, no reason, and every single time, I'm not even joking you here. They pulled us out of the car and put us face down on the pavement for what? No one had drugs. I didn't roll with people who did drugs. We didn't have weapons. Every time, all y'all get out the car, face on the ground, like, what? For what? Why do I have to get out and then get put on face floor on the pavement every time? It happened every time. I'm like, and I think to myself, would that have happened if I was white?
No, it wouldn't.
If you're white or Caucasian, and it's just like I'm curious. It's a real question. When you get pulled over, do you just already know that they're gonna pull you out the car and put you put you face down on the pavement
in a submissive position
while they search your car, and you tell them no, hey, I'm not gonna let you search my car, and then they're going like, oh, now we're really gonna do we're gonna call 3 or 4 extra cars, and then they don't even find nothing, but they're gonna make you suffer. I said it's kind of weird. Like, now obviously there could be situations where people have dealt with that. And that's obvious. It's not like, oh, no one ever deals with that. There's obviously exception to every rule, but that was just normal all the time. Like, not like, oh yeah, one time that happened. That did happen to me. No, that happened all the time. To the point where I was like, man, I can't go out with my friends at night. I just gotta ride solo. We gotta meet each other there because I just don't feel like, because I'm in a car with 4 black guys and we're driving around going home, that we got to get pulled over, and like we're just instantly doing something that we're not supposed to be doing.
That's that racial bias. Like you said something earlier that I want to touch on just real quick. You talked about being deployed and the rules of engagement, because I had a similar experience with that, and they actually told me the exact same thing as we're going through our training right before we enter into country. Rules of engagement training. They're like, hey, there's gonna be times where you're gonna be out there, and some of the locals, they may have weapons, and they may point them at you, but you cannot engage unless they shoot at you first. And in my mind at the time, I was like, hey man, okay, so this dude, I don't know how you were taught, but I was always taught when you handle a weapon, you don't pull it on somebody unless you're ready to use it. Like, unless I'm about
respect for the weapon.
Yeah, unless I'm about to take your life, I'm not pointing that weapon at you, because if I'm gonna aim my weapon at you, it's because I'm ready.
Yeah, like there's no bluffs. Like, you don't like.
Yeah, it's go time. Like, if I pull my weapon and I'm pointing at you, it's because I'm about to use it. Like, I'm taking the safety off and I'm going to shoot you. So when I heard that, I was like, so this dude can point a gun at me and I can't do nothing. And I was like, hey man, that seems kind of okay. That doesn't seem fair. And that's in another country. But in this country, you don't even have to have a gun. Like, you don't have to have anything. Like, you can be shot for not having anything at all. And I'm like, why is it in another country you have to have a gun pointed at you before you can engage? You have to actually be shot at before you can engage. But here, we don't have to have that. And I think that bias comes into play because I'm going to be honest with you. When I first got to Afghanistan, I had a bad experience. Like, we had just got off the helicopter, and maybe like 30 yards from where we were, we got rocketed. Like, we catch a rocket, and I've been only there for like maybe 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And from that point on, I had something against the Afghani people. And I had something against them because, like, it bothered me because they worked on the base they worked on the base. So they had their little areas, their little huts and all that stuff. And after my first near brush with death, I'm just sitting there like, why are they here? Like, why? Like, I don't want them here. Like, I'm looking at them a certain way because, like, we started getting rocketed a lot more, and they're like, yeah, they found some of the people that were inside feeding information to the outside, telling them coordinates and stuff, and I had something against them. Like honestly, I had a dislike for the Afghani people. I disliked them for months on end because, like, I'm like, why are we working with the people that are trying to kill us? But I knew in my mind that every one of them that I saw, I had something against him. And I was like, hey man, just give me a reason. Just give me any reason. And I understand because I was afraid at first, and then I was angry, and I took that forward, and like, but I understood that that's how I was feeling, and I was willing to admit that to myself. And it took me probably like 3 months, and I had some interactions with the people because they would make the food, and they would like wash our clothes and stuff. So I actually had to have interactions with them, and initially I was real shitty towards them. Like, I was just like, hey man, wash my fucking clothes, and I was like, man, give me my fucking food. But then, like, one of them was making a joke to me, and he said something, and it probably wasn't not funny, but like, I was like, man, this dude trying to fucking talk to me. Then I came back the next day, and he made another joke. So slowly, I started to kind of let my guard down a little bit, because I was like, all right, well, maybe maybe this dude isn't so bad. Like, maybe it's not all of them. So it took me about 3 months to actually kind of like lose that. Not even like lose it, but like for it to kind of like lighten up a little bit to where I was like looking at them as actual people and like not as like everybody's a damn terrorist, because that's unfair. But like in that moment, that's how I saw them. I was like, all you guys are terrorists, and I don't care what you say or what you do. And it took me kind of opening my eyes, and as I spent more time with them, I was like, hey man, I'm being ignorant. Like this is stupid. Like I can't treat all of them like they're all terrorists, because like this dude, he very well, I mean, this could be the job that he like takes food to his family. Like I can't hold this personal bias against him based off of what one person or a group of people has done, because that's not fair. And I realized that I had to do. I was like, okay, I know I'm afraid, and like, you know, this happened, but like I can't carry this forward, and I can't keep doing this. So I was like, all right, cool. So I made a change, and I was like, I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt, and at least on a case by case basis. And I feel like if I can do that in a hostile territory, why can't other people do that? Because that's what I feel the police force is doing nowadays. They've had either a bad experience or they use their personal bias, and now they're acting on it. And like, not to say that every single one of them that's what they're doing, but like I've been in that situation, and that's what I did. So now I can see, I know what it looks like, I know what it feels like, and to me that's what I feel like happens with a lot of police officers in regards to people of color.
And it's generalizing, and I think it goes both ways. So a lot of times we can be like, oh man, there's a lot of bad cops, or cops get a bad rep. They're like, oh no, we're not all like that. I said, yeah, it kind of goes both ways, but it's one of those things where you got to realize, but there is a difference though. I said the difference being that when a cop's like, oh, you know, I don't want to be discriminated against or lumped in, or we're not all bad people. I say, yeah, you got to realize though, when it's a situation where a cop is making judgment, there's no real accountability there, because it's always it's majority of the time it's the cop's word against the person's, right?
And they're usually not around to defend themselves.
And if it's a situation where it's the cops and somebody else, and the cops, and obviously not to say every cop is bad, but they have the ability to spin it in whatever way they want, advantageous if possible. They do have that option, whereas the people really don't have that ability to say, hey, no, you know, unless they just got video recording or there was a witness or something. But when it comes down to it, when there's nobody around, you don't have a phone recording or whatever, it's not equal. You know what I'm saying? So,
and I think that's frustrating, because like even when there is video, it seems to me like, so even when you see video, it really angers me when I hear people who see the same video that I'm watching, and they try and they don't have any empathy. Like everybody's just like, oh well, if he'd have just done whatever he said, and he's like, okay, well he did. Like he did what they said, and now it's like, now after we've tried to kind of defend the police officer, now we have to poke holes in the victim. So now we're gonna look at that person like, oh well, you know, he had a record of like, you know, of soliciting or whatever, and I'm like, okay, what does that have to do with anything? Like, what does his record have to do with that in this moment? Because like, if you ran up on a dude and you saw that he had like a history of like of violence or whatever, okay, hey, make a mental note of that. But like, are you gonna let that define who this person is? Because like, that could have been a charge from 8 years ago, and now we're dealing with something right now in this moment.
Not to even, but a prime example. A prime example. If there's a prostitute and she's walking home, and a guy comes up and rape her, it's the same thing as somebody. That would be the same thing as saying, well, she was a prostitute, so I mean,
exactly.
It was okay if she got raped. Who says that? It's never okay for you to rape someone, or you know, it's never okay.
Whether you did that for your work or whatever, like the point of the fact of the matter is, whether you're a prostitute or not, you still got raped. Like, it's still wrong.
You still have rights. It doesn't even matter. Like, even if, like I said, you're a prostitute, that doesn't give anyone else the right to violate your body. It doesn't. Like, it doesn't at all. So you see people try to, I think it's what it is they try to dehumanize someone so that they feel comfortable about the situation. And for that to happen, you have to know that it was a bad situation and they weren't comfortable. Because if they're trying to justify they're essentially saying, hey, what I'm seeing is wrong, and I know it,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't want to like dislike
Mm-hmm.
cops or something. So I'm to make me feel better about what I just saw. I'm gonna look at this person and say, well, they were a bad person.
Yeah.
So now you know
Mm-hmm.
what? It's okay.
I'm gonna villainize them.
I'm gonna
I gotta
villainize
find
them.
some way to kind of like paint them as like we got this good guy, bad guy kind of thing. Like it's like, oh, either you're a good guy, or you're a bad guy. So hey, to me, the good guy is the police, okay? And I need to make you the bad guy now. So now I have to look for something. I'm like, oh well, he had a history of violence. Okay, well he got that like 10 years ago when he was 18. The dude's 30 now. Like, how's that's a history of violence? You never know what he was gonna do. I'm like, so now you're making the victim who's now dead. You're trying to dehumanize them and make them seem like they're the villain, so it can kind of fit into this narrative to where it's like, okay, well the police is the good guy and this guy was the bad guy, so it makes it easier for you to sleep at night. And I don't see how you can do that. Like, honestly, like, the idea of right and wrong is so subjective.
Yeah.
Because I'm not even sure if there really is a such thing as right and wrong. It all depends on what side of the spectrum that you fall on. Like, we could be looking at the same situation and you're like, well, hey, he did the right thing. But in my mind, I'm like, well, no, he did the wrong thing, because we're centered on two different sides.
And that's one of the things, like, I think is funny because that you bring that up, because it's always on perspective and what's socially acceptable, and it's really tied to where society is. And I honestly don't believe, like, I believe there's core right and wrongs. The only things I believe in, like when I say core right and wrongs, is like, you shouldn't kill anybody. Like, like, hey, there's a right and wrong, but like, you shouldn't murder someone.
Yeah.
Like, you shouldn't rape anyone. You technically shouldn't steal. But like, there's certain other things that are just like, but there's gray areas in between there and stuff like that. And I said, look at it this way: when America came into being, now when you read in history, it's the American Revolution, right? It's praised. This is a proud moment in history, right? But had they lost, had we lost, it would have been totally rewritten.
History is written by the winners. History is written by the winners.
Yeah, and the outcomes are determined by the winners. So it's some people would say it was a revolution, but other people might say that was treason. So again, this is a part where it's subjective. Like you said, it depends on what side of the spectrum you're on, and that's why I say you have to understand. And I feel like I try to be as open to things as possible, and understand that sometimes there's a gray area, sometimes it's right and wrong, and sometimes there's different perspectives. Like one thing I like to do is I intentionally like to watch content from people whose views oppose mine.
Yes, exactly. So you have a better understanding of it.
And I do, and a lot of times I'll watch a lot of stuff, and this is just in with relationships, politics, religion. A lot. I just all facets of life. I am interested in listening and watching people who completely trash what I believe in, because I like to hear from both sides.
Yeah.
Like, I've never been really big on like the confirmation bias. Like, what I mean by that is, like, I hear someone say something I want to believe to be true. So since they said it, I'm gonna continue to absorb this content because they said it, I believe it, and now we're both confirming we're right. But I won't listen to any opposing views.
Yeah.
And if you're opposing a view, you're wrong. I like to listen to other views because sometimes I want to know, like, where are you coming from?
How did you get
why did you get
why
to
do you
where you
feel
are?
that way, and
Yeah.
how did you get to this point? Because we're both seeing the same thing. It's perspective. It's like, I want to know, why do you see it that way? Because I genuinely want to know, because I'm like, okay, so we both saw the same video. How do you feel about that, and why do you feel that way? And sometimes you can have these conversations with people, but sometimes you can't.
Yeah.
Because people get real. like I said, I feel like today's society, it's either you agree with me or you disagree with me, and I can't respectfully do either. I want you to agree with everything that I've said, because if you oppose that, I need to convince you to agree with me. It's like people aren't okay with, like, if you had an opinion and I had an opinion, people today aren't okay with you having your own opinion. They want you to share their opinion to a fault. Like, hey man, do you agree with me on this? Nah, man. Well, why not? How? Well, this is the reason. I'm just like, hey,
and I'm like,
relax.
I can listen to someone and I can say, hey man, like I don't believe that, and they can. Oh, this. I'm like, well, you can try to explain it to me. I'm like, I'm gonna believe what I'm gonna believe.
I'm gonna listen,
but I will listen to you, and I'm not gonna. And I'm the type of person, like, I will listen. I'm not gonna change my mind then.
Yeah.
But I will reflect, because I don't feel like you should just because someone says something, you should just make snap decisions. You know what, man, you are right. I never thought about that. You're right. No, I'll listen, and if there are valid points, that's cool. But I will go vet that information.
Yeah.
If it's something important to me, I say, I feel this way. Opposition feels this way. They made X, Y, Z point. I will now, if it's something important to me, go look and do the research on my own and learn about and say, hey, they make these points, but they took this out of context, or they cherry picked, certain things, but they didn't take the whole. Like, it was this paragraph explaining it, but they only picked out one sentence that would fit into their narrative. Hence, okay, this is somebody I can't trust. Or it could be the flip side. Say, hey, you know what? They didn't cherry pick that. This is actually a good way of thinking about it, and I might change my perspective on whatever it is. It could be cooking. It could be like, I think this is the best way to cook. It's like, no, I think you should cook eggs like this, and I'm like, no, I like this, and then I'll go check it. And you know what? After I saw the research, this is actually the best way to cook eggs, and that goes with not only cooking but all aspects of life. And I feel like sometimes you have to open your mind and your heart to other people.
You should.
So that we can have a better understanding. And I feel like that's when the discrimination will end. Now, I will say that even though it's a bleak time, I do feel like it's looking up. Just because we're having these conversations in the media and people are thinking about it now. And the fact that people are at least entertaining the idea and thinking about it suggests that we are now finding ourselves in a society that is more open. And I think that's with the generation. Prime example. My generation, or our generation, and one of the biggest things to say, oh man, you're gay, you're a faggot.
Yeah.
Like, calling someone gay is like you're calling them a curse word. And it was an offensive thing. And that was just normal. Now we live in a culture where it's like, if you say, "Oh man, you're gay," people are like, "Hold on, what you're offending me, and you're offending a whole people." And now and you have to come to realize that what you say has power, and it can hurt and affect other people. And you have to realize, like, oh man, when I was growing up, it wasn't a big deal, and I never thought about it. But now that you say that, now I see that what I'm saying is hurtful, and I don't say that anymore. So I can take that out of my vocabulary. I'm not going to say, oh, quit being gay, because that would insinuate that because you're homosexual, that you're a bad person or that you're a weak person. And it doesn't equal that. It doesn't mean that you are, because you're homosexual, you're a bad person. So I try to take things like that out of my vocabulary, and that was part of when I was young in my generation. That's just a term I use, but being ignorant. Now that I am more educated, it is out of my vocabulary, because I understand that word has power, and it can hurt other people. So I take that out of my vocabulary. I did wrong. I learned what I was doing was wrong because I empathized and I listened and I saw the effects it had on other people, and I changed my viewpoint and I changed the way I operate, and now I think I'm in a more positive space. And I think that's the way a lot of people have to look at it. You know what? And say, hey, I might be Caucasian, or I might be Asian, or I might be black. I need to look at things from other people's perspectives, and we can at least get to know each other and understand. You would never really understand what it means to be black
Yeah.
in America unless you've lived it. I'm not going to fully understand what it means to be white, Asian in America unless I've lived it. Jewish, whatever.
But you have an open mind about that, and like somebody brought up a point to me, and I was talking to somebody, and they were basically trying to give me like the defense of the police officer, and it's like, well, you know, sometimes those situations get real touchy, and like, you know, why don't you? I suggest like if people really want to know, why don't they go do a ride out with the police? And I was like, you know what, you know, that's something that people could do. Like if they want to, you know, get more involved and kind of see how things work out in real time, you could very well do some rides. But when she said that, it made me think. I was like, okay, so you have an answer for like what the minorities can do to understand stuff from a police officer's perspective, but what can we do from a police officer's perspective? How do you replicate like the black experience? Like how can I tell you to replicate that? Like, hey man, I want you to give me your gun, let me put a gun to your head, and let me throw you on the ground and let me harass you. Like what's something that would be comparable to give you that type of experience so you can know what it feels like? And as I thought about it, I was like, there isn't one. Like people lack empathy because there isn't an experience like this one. Like you don't know unless you're experiencing it and you're living it. So there is no like, okay, well, hey, how can I experience this, or how can I show you what this is like? And you can't, because there is no experience like this. Like it's just something like if you know what it is, you know what it is. If you don't, but I mean, there just isn't anything that I can think to give people that insight, because people know how people of color are treated, and they know that they don't want that for themselves, but they don't want to acknowledge it though. They're still like, well, you know, there isn't, you know, and there are probably like a lot of ignorant people out there that are still saying that there's, you know, racism is dead or whatever, which they know is wrong, but like people know what they do and don't want for themselves. Like they're like, well, I don't want to be treated like that, but you know, I'm sorry that it happened to that dude. But are you really sorry? Like, do you really care?
But
like,
it doesn't happen. And I say one of the biggest one. I remember we had this conversation before, and I said the reality is that, and I understand this. Some people may agree with it. Some people might not. This is just my opinion on it, and this is what I believe. There will never be equality between blacks and whites. There will never be. And something like, oh, that's I said in my justification, the reason I feel like this is because you have to think about how long slavery lasted.
Yeah, what the system was built for.
Right? That's hundreds of years of a gap in the one thing that matters most in this world right now, and that is money. Money is everything. And people are like, well, no, money isn't. Money is everything.
It's power.
Because, and I say that because right now people say, well, how come you don't vote for this, that, and other? And I challenge them by saying the vote is important. I'm not gonna sit here and say you shouldn't vote. You should get your voice heard.
Yeah.
But I understand that the reality is that it doesn't matter what I vote for or who I put in office. The real thing that matters is money. And whoever has money has the opportunity to put together lobbyist groups. They have the money to donate, fund campaigns. So I say, hey, we're going to start a petition. We want to vote because we want rights for blacks in America, or police reform, or whatever. And we say, okay, yeah, we want to put you in office because we want you to do this. And they say, yeah, we're going to do this. Politician says that. And then another guy comes over and say, hey, you know what? I don't really like that view. They don't even have to say that. Hey, here's $10 million. We're going to help fund your campaign. What do you think that money really means? Do you think that those millions and millions of dollars that companies or people put towards campaigns or funding is because they believe in them. Let's be honest here. Businesses and multimillionaires, billionaires do not just throw money at stuff just to throw money at stuff.
It's not philanthropy.
That's not how they became millionaires and billionaires. They don't just waste money. They see it as an investment. I will give said money so that when time comes, if I need my back scratched, I need you to scratch my back. We don't like this bill. This bill hurts my corporation or my industry. We need you to vote favorably. And people might not admit that this happens, but if you don't admit that this happens, I think you're just being naive. The reality is, policies are funded and policies are determined by big corporations who are willing to foot the bill and pay and donate so that they can get favorable outcomes. Why do you think big pharmaceutical, oil?
It's not it's not philanthropy. Like, I'm going to give you this money, but I have a set of beliefs, and when the time comes, I need you to acknowledge my set of beliefs and how you're going to act. Like, people don't just give money just because they're called lobbyists for a reason.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to support you, and I'm going to support you financially, but I have these beliefs, and maybe you don't have to carry them like all the time, but when it matters the most, I need your support on doing this or doing that. So I need you to sway it one way or the other. And I mean, I agree with you. Like, big business, like, they run the world. Like, people in power, positions of power, they didn't just get there because they were like, oh, well, I'm just here. No, this has been a system that's been put in place since the beginning. So the people that are in power now, the system has allowed them to get there so they can keep the same way of life going. Yeah. Like, it wasn't meant for, like, the system wasn't meant to be like, okay, well, you'll be in power for a little bit and then the power will change. No, it was put in place to ensure that the people who started it this way will continue it on, and they'll keep this going in said future if we even get to that point. Like,
now, tying it all in together to what I was saying, like going back to what I was saying about why I believe that there will never be really equality, is when I say that, because there has been hundreds of years of disparity between the income of white America and black America. And I'm just using these for example. There's obviously more than one race, and there's obviously, there's multiple, but I'm just using this for an example. So now you have a situation where, yes, today, as a black man or black woman, you can become successful. Yes, you can have black millionaires, billionaires. Yes, it is possible. I'm not saying it is not possible, but we are talking about on a wider scale. We're not talking about the few people who make the exception. If you look at the class system of who holds the majority of the wealth, how much of that population is black versus how much is white?
Not much.
And it comes down to what I like to call like old money. So you have hundreds of years of people who were able to accumulate money while slaves were not. So now, when you have slavery end, which it didn't necessarily end, it ended on paper, but it didn't necessarily go away when it did.
It's still going on today, like
so
the prison system.
Yeah, so you have that to go away, and they say now we're equal. Whether it happened automatically or whatever, but when they said, hey, now everyone's equal, you weren't equal really, because now you are starting from square one with nothing against a population who has had hundreds of years to accumulate mass wealth and establish power. So now you are not you. This is why I say there will never be actual equality, because you cannot make up.
You can't make up that type of
You
ground.
can't make up that type of ground. You can't make up even if it was 100 years, even if it was just 100 years, you can't make up 100 years. You're 100 years behind the power curve. You're 100 years whole society, a whole race of people, a whole culture of people is 100 years behind the power curve. So even when they improve, you'll still be behind.
Yeah, it'll be just enough to kind of like make you feel like it's something, but like the people that are in those positions of power, they're going to
continue to grow.
They're going to continue to do the same things that they've been conditioned to do from the jump. So it's like you get like say they're like, okay, we'll let a black person have a seat at the table. So that's one seat at the table. They'll only allow you to do so much, and they're like, okay, well, we'll make you feel like you're doing something. Yeah, you've got a little bit of money, but like when it really counts, like the system wasn't built to just collapse because one person got a seat at the table. Like the system was built to continue on the exact way for the class of people that it was made for. So you can't make up that kind of ground because that's not what this system was built for. Like we're still using the same system to advance, but that system was never meant for people of color to advance. It was always meant for the white man to advance in it. So if we're going to continue, you'd have to have a completely new system starting from scratch to even like start to do something. So
and see, and what I say is like when I say that there's not going to be, because I don't believe that whole system is going to collapse. Now, and that's not to say that something like, well, there's poor white people. Yes, of course. There's always an exception to every rule. There's obviously, middle class, poor, middle class people in white America too. Yeah. Yes, but if you look at, I'm not talking about the handful. I'm talking about if you look at the vast majority of actual wealth holders. We're talking about wealth holders. These are the people. These are the people who make influential decisions and who can back. When they say, "Hey, I want something done," they can back it with millions, billions of dollars. They can back it. They don't have to say, "Hey, we need to try to start a movement or a Twitter movement," or, "Hey, can we get people to get?" They have millions of money set aside just to make things go their way. Off the back. Yeah. They could just, we're done. We're making it happen. So it's a difference. Now, but there's obviously, there's going to be a time we close that gap. There's going to be a time when we get a little bit closer, but it will never be perfect. Yeah. I think it's fine as long as we continue to progress, though.
Yeah, that's all we can ask for.
I think all we can ask for is continuing to progress and ask for understanding. Because I feel like if we understand each other and say, hey, you know what? Understand where I'm coming from. And I'll try to understand where you're coming from. Yeah. And I think that that's the most we can do. I don't look and say, hey, because you're in said privileged class, I don't like you. I don't even know you. Yeah. You could be a great person. That's cool. That's not saying everyone who's in that higher tier of class, is a bad person. Yeah. I would never try to lump everyone in. I'm just saying that there's a portion of the community who holds power, and I'm like, we don't have to have the same tax bracket to understand each other and agree and say, hey, we can come to some middle ground. And say, hey, I don't understand what it's like to be you. You don't understand what it's like to be me. But let's kind of like meet in the middle and say, hey, it's okay if we don't understand. As long as we treat each other like decent human beings and say, hey, you know what? There's certain rights that we should all have. Yeah. And it shouldn't be based on prejudice or biases. Yeah. Let's just treat each other like humans. I don't care if you're rich. I don't care if you're poor. We're both humans, and we're going to treat each other with respect. And I think that's something we can strive for. I think that's attainable.
Like, I agree with you. Like, I think for us to make actual systemic change, like, as much as people may hate to hear this, but we will need the white people. Like, we will need that class of people to show empathy and to show that, hey, we can be progressive. Like, we can be progressively thinking and say, hey, look, we're not the same, but we're still people. Like, we're still humans. Like, I don't have to know exactly what it's like to be you, but let me at least put myself in your shoes and be like, hey, would I want that for myself? No? Okay, cool. I can make a change now. And, like, the one thing that I'll take away from the George Floyd, as unfortunate as it was, is that for the first time in a long time, I saw people of all races, all nationalities, all band together and protest for the exact same thing. Because when I saw that, I was like, it seemed as though everybody is seeing the same thing, and everybody's outraged about it. Like, everybody's on the same page and saying, hey, man, that was wrong. Like, I don't have to be black to feel like, oh, hey, I'm upset about this. And honestly, I get upset because sometimes, like, I have people be like, hey, man, you know, I know it's a lot going on, but you know, are you okay? How do you feel? And I'm like, how do you feel? What do you mean, how do I feel? Like, how do you feel in this situation? Oh, I just wanted to check on you to see how you was feeling. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm upset. Well, how do you feel? Because you should honestly be feeling I don't care if you're black, white, Asian, whatever. You should be feeling the same way that I'm feeling right now, because this is not like a black people problem. This is a people problem. Like, we should all be asking each other how we're feeling, because we should all be feeling the same way in the fact that, like, hey, man, we've just seen something bad happen, or like something's going on in the world today, and like we should all be upset about it, not just like, oh, well, black people, man.
And here's an example, and I think this is something that maybe everybody can relate to. And because I want to bring that up, because, like, yeah, how you said there was a lot of people, but there was a few who were like, you know what, he might have been a bad person. I heard he was a criminal or whatever. Let me preface that by saying this: every one of us, it's on my mind, but I can't even think. What was it? Ye who throws the first stone.
He without sin cast the first stone.
And I said, no one is without sin. That would be like, I mean, equate to this. This is like, you're at work, right? You're at the office. Your boss, whether you're male or female, just thinking about it in the opposite way. If you're female and you're at work, and man, you had some pencils at work, and your son needed some pencils or pens, and you're like, oh man, you know what? I'm not gonna have time to go to the grocery store or the Walmart to pick up some pens. Let me just take some pens from work and bring them home to my kid. My kid needs the pens. I'm not gonna have time. I'm running late. I've been at the office all day. I'm not gonna have time to stop, but my kid needs this for homework. I'm just gonna take these pens from the office. You're thinking it's not a big deal. I'm just taking pens. But what did you technically do?
Steal.
You stole. Now, obviously, I'm not saying everyone steals pens from the office, but it's something like, equate that to anything. You stole you took a Twinkie out of the refrigerator at the office that wasn't yours.
Everybody can relate.
Whatever. It's something of that nature that it's not a big deal. No one's gonna hold you over to the fire, but you did it. We're all human. We're all guilty of something, right? Now, you took those pencils, or pens, and that's technically stealing. Now your boss rapes you. No one's at work. He rapes you, and then someone says, "Well, Sally, you didn't see me, but I saw you steal those pens. You're a thief. So yeah, he might have raped you, but you were a bad person. You were stealing stuff at work. So I don't really feel bad for you because you were doing things that you shouldn't have been doing. Like, if I tell you that, do you think does that sound okay?
No.
Or are you gonna look at me like that sounds stupid?
That's two different things.
That's two different things.
You're
like,
trying to conflate the two when they're separate instances.
Yeah,
like
you're gonna look at me like I'm stupid. This doesn't make any sense. That is exactly what I'm thinking when I see something happen, like it happened to George Floyd, and someone says, "Well, I didn't he do drugs, or didn't he?" What?
Yeah,
What?
What
Like
are you talking
that?
about?
What are you talking about? That's the exact same way. So just think about it. If when I give you that example, you said stealing pens, that means you should get. That's stupid. You're making a stupid comparison. This is what I'm thinking about when I see a man. That's how it sounds to me when I see a man asking for air, and he can't get it. And then you say because he was a bad person, he should have a knee in his throat and not be allowed to breathe. See, it doesn't sound to me when I say that. You said that sounds stupid, but when you say it to me, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So it's a silly comparison, but that's how I feel about it.
Yeah.
Because to me, it just doesn't make any sense. And I know if I said something like it probably wouldn't make any sense to you.
I mean, I definitely agree with you, man. And like I said, this is just one of those topics. It's like it's extremely difficult to talk about,
Sensitive.
but I think
topic,
that it's is definitely something we really need to talk about. And like, I think right now, like I said, people are starting to be more receptive, and
Yeah.
it appears that people are kind of starting to open their eyes more and kind of wanting that change. I think there are a lot of things that we can do to invoke change. I think one obviously is it's from a political standpoint, but it's voting. And like, I understand how certain people feel about voting. Some people don't think it matters. I at least think that you should have a voice and that you should vote, and I think that it's important. Another thing that I think is beneficial to everyone, not just people of color, but for just to get a better understanding and to kind of help progress things forward, is the ability to communicate.
Yeah.
Like, on all facets of everything, and just open that dialogue, because like, these are sensitive things to talk about and nobody wants to talk about, and they're uncomfortable topics. But that's why I feel like we need to talk about them more. Like, we need to have more conversations with people about the things that are going on in life, because as we start to open up that communication line, people are starting to get a better understanding, and now people are like, okay, well, hey, why do you feel this way? Because, you know, I see it this way. Okay, well, why do you like? If we can open up that line of communication, we can kind of start to look at stuff from other people's perspective, and then we can start to have that empathy and say, okay, well, hey, I didn't think about it like that. Granted, I'm not a person of color, so I don't understand exactly how it is, but like, now that I'm talking to you, I'm starting to open my eyes and see, and like, I got it. Like, everybody knows that there's just certain people that you can't have those conversations with, because it's so sensitive and it's so,
Yeah.
and like, you know your friends, like, you know who you can have those deeper conversations with and who you can't. But I think it's incumbent upon us to start to open them with everybody, and just to say, hey, look, I know this is gonna be uncomfortable. You may not want to have it right now, but I'm gonna kind of push the issue a little bit and try to get that door open so we can have this conversation, so where maybe you'll feel more and more comfortable every time I do it. And now you were a person that was uncomfortable. Now you feel more comfortable talking about it, and now everybody's kind of opening up these lines of communication, and now we're getting everybody talking, as opposed to like saying, oh, well, I know I can talk to this one friend about it, but like, I can't talk to everybody. So I think it's extremely important to start opening up lines of communication with not just black people to black people, but just like everybody, like all ethnic groups, all nationalities, everybody starting to talk, and to talk about the things that bother us, and like, kind of open up on like, hey, this is how I feel, this is how I see it, what do you think? And that'll kind of like, I think that right there will establish a certain level of change that I think will be very productive moving forward, especially with like the newer generation, because this newer generation, like Generation Z or whatever, like, they're so much more open to like taking chances and doing things and pushing the bounds. So I think we need to continue to do that.
I think we need to encourage that. I think one thing we do is, through our kids, promote that type of inclusion, like, promote that type of behavior, because I think that's where the change comes, when we promote that type of behavior and promote that type of openness, and that openness and that dialogue. But I mean, like I said, I think we had a good conversation today. This is really eye opening. Obviously, we could have went a little bit more into it, but I mean, I think that for the most part, I think we said what was on our mind.
I got one last thing to say. The last thing I want to touch on, and before we close this show out, because I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't say this. Personally, I think the number one thing that especially people of color can do is uplift and support each other.
Yep.
Because I truly believe, with the current system that's been in place, we've been conditioned to not only compete with everyone else outside of our race group, but we've been conditioned more so to compete with people in our own race group. Like, the people that we should be supporting the most are the ones that we are the toughest on.
Yeah.
And like, I feel like minorities in general should, like, we should be supporting, like, we should be gassing our people up, like, with premium. Yeah. Like, straight up, like, when you see a person doing good, you need to support that person. Like, you need to sit there and step up and say, hey, you know what? I see you doing good. I'm going to acknowledge that, my man. Like, you're doing great. Like, I'm going to support you, and I'm going to, like, let you know that I'm on your team, because we're not only competing with the rest of the world, because minorities have to work twice as hard, and women as well. We have to work twice as hard just to get to the same exact place that people from affluency basically start at. We have to work twice as hard and be twice as good just to get the exact same amount. And I think that we need to definitely like support each other, uplift each other, support black-owned business. Try to put people on, like acknowledge the things that people do, and like really have a deeper appreciation for all of those things, because when we start to do those little things, we're starting to not only like condition ourselves, but we're showing the earlier, like the generation that's coming right now, and that they'll continue to teach. Like we're trying to put that in place now so they can continue that forward. Okay, hey, I want to support black-owned business. I want to support my brother. I want to lift him up. I want to do all these things, and I think that's extremely important, and that's something that I really feel like every person has in their control and continue to push forward. And I'll always be a big advocate of like supporting our own.
Yep.
And instead of tearing them down, because like I said, we tear people down faster than anybody. Like, people want you to do good, but they don't ever want you to do better than them. And I think that's unfortunate, and we have to change that mentality, and we have to change that mindset. Exactly. But like I said, I think today was a good show. Like I said, I had a lot to say on this topic, and like I said, I appreciate you coming and talking to me about this, and kind of opening up with your perspective on it as well. So it was a good topic today.
All right, we'll see y'all next time. Thanks for coming out to the MadHouse podcast.
Thanks for tuning in with us today. Hopefully we were able to give you something you can use and take forward into your day. If you want to reach out to us with any questions, comments, concerns, or even topic requests, links are in the description. Join us back here again next week in the MadHouse. We appreciate you and where you are in your journey in life. And always remember, we're all quite mad here. You'll fit right in.